From the city that friendliness built, Lebanon, Oregon, welcome to Pivot. My name is Michael Carragon, and I am your host. On this podcast, you're going to hear from everyday heroes in our community that have genuine hearts to encourage others by sharing their uncurated stories of redemption and how they have leveraged victories and hardships to impact others. If you crave raw, authentic stories of resiliency, personal transformation, and the strength of community, Pivot is for you. Hello and welcome back to the Pivot Podcast. My name is Michael and I'm your cruise director for this episode. And with me is the ultra talented and highly sought after Mr. Rafe.
Good to be back, everyone.
Man, we're glad you're here. And our very special guest today is Monica.
Hello.
As we start off every podcast, we ask for your most embarrassing moment to share that. We're kidding.
I don't get embarrassed very easily. It might take me a while. But thank you, no.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I am a filmmaker, actress, model, and mother of 9.
Did you say mother of 9?
I did say mother of 9.
Wow. Do you sleep?
Not as much as I would like to.
I thought medical school was hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we always say, one of the essential core values of Pivot is good coffee. So we have plenty on hand for you if we need a nap, Yeah. Well, we're glad you're here. Our whole idea of having the art of conversation, being able to connect with others in our community that have amazing stories and talk about resiliency, talk about redemption, everything that starts with an R. It sounds like that's a cool buzzword we talk about on this. So why don't you just share a little bit about your background and maybe how you got into acting and where you grew up and what was that like for you?
All right. How far back do I go? I started acting about 10 years ago, but I got into the industry a lot longer ago than that, I guess. I grew up in Sweet Home. It was a little logging town, not far from here. And I got scouted one summer as a model. And
how do you get scouted? Like, what does that look like?
So I was playing softball for a different city's team, and during the week, my mom and the coach would meet kind of halfway, drop me off, and a woman came up to me on the sidewalk, and we laughed all day about this afterwards because she was like, "You have an interesting jawline," and then she gave me a business card and said, "You should call us," but it was for a modeling agency. And I had been told a lot at that point that, you should be a model, because this is in the 90s when the models are like a size 0 and, and I was really I was much thinner than I am now. And so I followed up and I met with that agency and they signed me locally. And then they had a mother agent out of Canada that wanted to promote me internationally as well. And that agent, had me do something called the Elite Models Look Competition, which I think still goes on today. And I won a couple rounds, and then I went down to be rep by Elite in LA for a while.
Wow. It's amazing. It started on a softball field or a baseball field, right?
Yeah, softball. Yeah, softball pitcher to model.
I didn't know talent, modeling agent scouts, kind of like canvas the area.
They do. Actually, the agency I'm with now, I think they go to they watch people online. They go to festivals and they look for up and coming talent.
Wow.
So, yeah. So that was my first taste of the industry. And then it was much later. So my husband didn't want me to get too far, or my now husband. And so after I moved to LA, he came down a few months later and proposed. And so, and I said yes, obviously, since we did get married. And I came home for a while, went to Tokyo and modeled for a while, came home and got married. The plan was that I would continue to model and travel. But I got pregnant on our honeymoon, and I had 8 children in 11 years. And I had been told by a doctor, actually, that I may not be able to have children.
They told you that before your first child.
Yeah.
Of course.
I think he might have been slightly incorrect.
This is coming from a doctor's perspective.
I mean, I guess their wording was, it may be extremely difficult for you to get pregnant, which obviously was not the case. And so, let me think. So I had a family. And I never stopped thinking about that industry. Like, I came from this tiny little logging town. It was just that little taste I had of it. It was like, I want to go back to that. I want to get into that. And I love my family, and it's very fulfilling. But when it was actually before I had my 8th child, I saw an ad online for an art school in Portland. My husband was starting a new business at the time that I knew was going to need some marketing. And I thought, well, maybe I'll go to school to do the marketing for his business. And so I set up an appointment, like, I don't know what they're called. You go, their intake
consultation, maybe.
right?
Yeah.
And I'm a huge prayer person, and I'm somebody that really likes things to be confirmed, especially when it's like a big decision and a big life step. And so I just prayed, God, let me meet with exactly the right person today, whoever that is. And if it is your will for me to do this, let me walk out of here being enrolled in college and not having to pay anything up front, because we were super poor at the time. Like,
And those private schools aren't cheap.
No, they're not. And so, because I didn't even know like how I would pay gas or books or anything. But so I went up, and when I told them who I had an appointment with, they said, oh, they thought they had no appointments today. They didn't come in. They're not feeling well. I'll have to find someone.
Uh-oh.
Or maybe not.
Maybe not. Right?
Yeah, I'll have to find someone for you to meet with. And so it worked out as I prayed. It was the right person. I literally walked out, enrolled in school, and after going through things, it's like, you won't have to pay anything up front, which is what I needed, or I wasn't going to be able to do it. And also, I thought, I want to go for marketing, but after meeting with them, they're like, I really think that you need to go for film. That seems to be what you are more passionate about, and you'll get like the other marketing skills or whatever while you're there.
How long was the program?
It was a bachelor's degree, so 4 years.
4 years. Wow.
And this is while you had 8 kids.
Well, I had 7 when I enrolled, and I got pregnant with my 8th the first term. So that at the end of the first year, I had my 8th. And I did not take a term off because I knew I wouldn't go back. So I did 1 term online, the term the baby was born, and then I was traveling again. Because it's 80. This school, I didn't mention this. It was 80 miles away from where we live. So,
Wow.
it was like I had to really work to get my schedule where I was either taking like, and there were block courses, thankfully, but it was like 2 days a week. Or once I was in the program for a while, I started working on some of the television shows in town. And so I would go up on a Tuesday and work a full 12-plus hour day, because a typical day in television or film is 12 hours. That's the minimum. I've been on set for 23 hours before. That was miserable. Anyways.
What kind of TV shows were you working on?
I worked on Grimm and Leverage, a Netflix series that I'd rather not share the name of.
It's a safe space.
And that was PA work. I did work as an associate producer on some Discovery Channel stuff. But at that time, it was like 12 hours of working in television, 16 hours of school, 12 hours of working in television, sleeping on somebody's couch in between, or in their basement on a mattress, or
True artist.
wherever I could get to sleep. And then going home, being with my family 4 days a week, trying to get my house caught up, taking care of my kids, homeschooled, trying to get their school done, and then all over again.
So what was your major support system during this time? Because, I mean, you're talking about an 80-mile commute. You have 7 kids. You have the curriculum you need to keep up with. You're holding down jobs. I mean, it sounds like you're being pulled apart from every which way. So
Yeah, I mean, actually, my mother-in-law, and we're not really close. We've always gotten along, but we've never been close. But she thought it was so important for me to go to school. And like, if our car broke down, she'd give me her car to go. If, my sister watched my kids some, my mother did, but my mother-in-law would come those 3 days of the week. My husband worked from home, but she was there taking care of the kids, sometimes crying
That's
by the end of the
huge.
day, because 7 kids is a lot,
Yeah.
especially when they're not your own.
Sounds like a TV show, huh?
And I'm really thankful for that. But it was while I was in school that I had an acting teacher, because we were required to take an acting class, that told me, oh, you should also pursue acting. Like, you should do that as well. And so that's all I needed to hear, to go pursue the acting side. And I went when the baby was born, because I was 8 months pregnant when that teacher told me that after the baby was born. She was like 5 months old. when I went in, I still think about this. I'm like, I probably seem crazy. Like, I've given birth to 8 children. I'm going to walk into a modeling agency and ask them if they will represent me as a model. And they did. And then I kind of used that as my back door into being repped as an actor, because I knew from when I had modeled when I was younger, they send you on commercial auditions as a model because they want a pretty person. Doesn't really matter if you can act, whatever, you know. And so that was kind of how I then edged my way into getting actual representation and working as more of an actor than
Very
just a
nicely
model.
done. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you talked a little about the external support that you had, but the mental fortitude that it takes to accomplish something like to not only start it, but also see it through. That's something that's very intangible, and I'm wondering if you could kind of lay that out for us when when you're on these drives and you like put yourself back in your car and when you're driving, what's going through your mind and how do you keep on pushing forward in a time like this?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it's like an hour and a half drive each way. That was probably the only time I had to myself at all during that period of time, like with my own thoughts. Um, and it's bizarre. So one of our kids, and this is going to make me cry a little bit. One of our kids was born with a genetic disorder, and sorry.
No, that's good.
Take your time. This is
When
a
he was
place.
born, we were told that he may not live past 2, and that he'd be lucky if he lived past 7. And so while I was in cotton, he had to have all these tests, and all the time he had to have his blood drawn every 6 weeks. He had to have ultrasounds every 12 weeks. I never cried once for the first 7 years of his life over that particular thing. Like, I kind of took my emotions and I just tucked them down. I was like, I'm not going to cry. My child is not dying. And like the day he turned 7, I would be driving and I would just bawl all the way to school and all the way home, because like that release of like, my kid's gonna live. He's 19 now. He's great. You never know he had a genetic disorder. But so a lot of actually my drive was crying, because I was finally like, okay, he's gonna live. I can feel I can feel the pain I refused to feel because I didn't want to believe that it was possible that my kid was gonna die. Sorry.
No, not at all. I mean, that's such an impossible position to be in. I can only imagine.
Yeah, back to like what Rafe was asking about too, like about the mental fortitude, even with hearing that experience and everything else going on. I can't imagine everybody was saying, keep going in film school and everything.
Oh, no. No, it's interesting because even though I had a lot of support, especially from my mother-in-law, there were a lot of people close to me that even though they would help, they were like, you shouldn't be doing that. You have 8 kids. You need to be at home.
I'm sure they thought they were being helpful, but yet
they care about
kinda
you. Like,
like,
people
yeah.
always care about you. And I'm the type of person that I don't get offended easily. I
Yeah.
know people are always coming from a good place. And so I didn't get bitter. I didn't let it bother me. And as far as like the mental strength, gosh, I feel like I'm just dripping snot.
Oh, that's all right. This is a safe space.
Not at all.
We want real stuff on this. This is uncurated. Yeah?
As far as the mental strength, I'm a really spiritual person, and I'm also a person that I'm kind of all or nothing. I like, it might take me a while to commit to something, or I might be like, I'm doing this thing, but it's like, no, it doesn't happen. And then when I'm in, and I'm not.
Gangbusters.
Yeah,
huh?
I'm not going back. And I knew that's where I was supposed to be. Like, I just knew in my heart, like, I need to learn these skills. Because before I went there, I didn't know what a director was. I didn't know what a producer was. Like, I knew nothing. I needed film school just to know who did what. Like, I do nothing. So it did help me. A lot of people are like, you don't need film school, and they probably don't, but I
And
did.
this is 4 years, as you mentioned before. It's not just, okay, I'm going to go for 6 months and do like an intensive, which is great. But this is
Yeah.
4 years plus the practicals, plus all the everything, and running a family they're going through, and then
Yeah.
trauma.
Yeah. But yeah, and so then after school, I worked in television still for a while. I've done a decent amount of acting. I did it's interesting. I had a feature-length film that I had optioned, and it was about a woman overcoming abuse. It was the premise of it. And what's crazy is I could never quite get it right. We did not ever produce it, but when we were working on trying to find funding, I realized, this is going to take forever. And so I thought, well, because like I said, all or nothing. I'm like in this topic. I'm like, well, what can we do to help survivors of abuse or people in abuse in the meantime? And I decided, well, I'm just going to real quick do 20 interviews. I'm going to do this docuseries of survivors of abuse, which ended up, I traveled cross country. I met a woman on Twitter, flew to Boston. She picked me up at the Boston airport. I stayed with her for a week, and we went to New York, Pennsylvania, all these places, interviewing survivors of abuse. She got us in with a judge who had been a lawyer for abuse, was now a juvenile, or was a lawyer for abuse, and that was a judge for juvenile court. So we had some different experts, and I did all these interviews of survivors of abuse, and I took them and I edited them and I put them all online where, if people have access to them for free. And we've reached well over 1 million people just organically. It's something that when I was done, I just wipe my hands of it, and I never look at the emails. I never look at the videos. If every once in a while I accidentally tap on that email and it's just full of YouTube comment, because it's changed so many lives. I don't really know how many because it was such an emotional,
huge impact.
Yeah, the stories that you hear people tell you, because most people who end up in a abusive relationship as an adult were abused as children.
Cycles
at least,
of abuse.
Yeah, most of the people I interviewed, and often it's horrific, or they'll move from one relationship to another, and so that was one of the first things I did out of college. That was really uplifting for me.
I'm sure that took a piece out of you. That's a lot.
And then
being away from family on top of it after, right? Because you're on the East Coast.
Yeah, and I was only away from home for a couple of weeks. Most of it was editing, because it was a lot of editing. Because, a lot of people, it takes a few hours to tell a story, but most people won't sit through a few hours. So I had to try to shorten that down to 20, 30 minutes that were manageable, but still were true to what they had said.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. What else do you want to know?
There's so much. I guess a couple of questions real quick. Well, first of all, I want to mention, I hope it's all right, we can cut it out if it's not, but I got to meet Monica before I met Monica. And what I mean about that is when I lived in a former life back on the East Coast, one of my favorite channels was the Independent Film Channel. And they had this show on there that was about Portland, Oregon, and I had never been here and really didn't I thought it was funny because I was familiarized with Saturday Night Live and the actors on it, and they had these little vignettes about all this weird stuff, and I'm like, I grew up in New York, but I think I had cornered the market on knowing weird stuff, right? But I'm watching. I remember watching this one episode about, it was called Couples Dinner on Portlandia. Can you share about that one?
Yeah. That was my first booking that was episodic television, and it was a really funny skit.
It was.
And for me, it was a great role.
We watched it yesterday, right?
I watched it. It was pretty good.
We got Rafi in Next Generation.
Basically, it's like a single guy decides he's going to come to a couple's dinner, and it just turns into a zombie flick. He infects us all. And
typical day.
Yeah, because it's we're couples, and the single can't come to this dinner, and it is pretty funny.
Who'd you play in it?
I'm one of the couple's guests, and I turn into a zombie in the end. And actually, one of the funny things about filming that is at the end, the guy from 30 Rock, whose name I can't remember, but they chop his arm off with an axe. And Carrie kicks the arm, and the first time she kicked it, it just, I caught the arm because it came right at me. And they're like, did anybody get that on film? Which they hadn't, obviously.
That's awesome.
So.
Yeah, I know that. You're so accomplished. I just had to bring that because that was dear to my heart. And then eventually moving to Portland, Oregon. And then here I am. I meet Monica, and I'm like, wow, this is crazy. I know, because I watched that over and over again.
That's hilarious.
But I guess, go ahead.
That seems interesting because, you mentioned that was kind of your first feature in episodic TV, right? And now where you are today, kind of looking that growth trajectory, I understand that you have a couple of works in the process that are your own, that you can call your own. Could you tell us a little bit about those?
Yeah, I have a 30-minute comedy short that I've written that I am directing and playing the lead in, and this is the first time I'm taking on those 3 big roles.
All or none, right? Jumping right in, right? There you go.
I have played small roles and stuff I've directed before, but this is me saying, can I do that? And I'm excited because we're going to film all around Lebanon. There's several businesses that are involved that are supporting us. Michael is going to be in it. He plays my boss.
The haters are going to hate, but I try.
I think he'll be great. So I'm really excited about that. We've got some great people that will be on the crew. And I think I'm hoping it turns out great. And then I also booked my first lead in a feature film. And that is a psychological thriller.
Uh-oh.
That's my favorite genre. There we go. Tell me more about that.
Well, I don't know if I can share details on here.
I'm just nervous about it already, to be honest with you.
You might not want to watch it. I don't know if I could watch it.
I don't know.
But that shoots in Walla Walla in June. I'm really excited about
Going
that
up to
too.
Washington, huh?
Yeah.
On location.
Yeah. And I'm happy too that they kind of are coming along together, because I've had this fear in my career, and I think a lot of actors have this. And it's like, I'm at the beginning of my career still, really. Like I feel like I'm just kind of breaking the ice as far as acting goes. But you get afraid of like them thinking you're only one thing, and so I'm like, oh, good, I have two
Like
things
stereotype?
because I love comedy. Okay, so for instance, the first film I was ever in, I was on a site where a casting site. There's these casting sites that like casting directors post the roles that need to be booked, and then agents submit their actors for the different roles.
Yeah.
But actors often can see what's on there. And I was a newer actor still, and I had seen that this film was shooting in Portland, and I saw a role on it that I wanted so bad. And it was like the kooky, weird next door neighbor. Her name was Layla. And I got an audition for it, but it was for the bigger role in the film, but it was like this straight-laced, powerful, boring woman. And I was like, so I messaged my agent and was like, well, I'd really like to audition for that other role. And he's like, oh, I can't submit you to 2. And so I went in and it's crazy because around here, you may have 10 auditions a month. You may have 2 auditions in a month. But on this particular day, I had 3 castings in Portland.
Oh, wow.
So I went to my first casting. Then I went to the film audition for the straight-laced, boring woman. And when I'm done, and this makes me laugh so hard, it's like on a stage in this weird spot, and the director walks up onto the stage and like looks into my eyes, and then he goes, I think I'd like you to come back for Layla. The crazy one that I wanted. And I was like, yes. And obviously I looked at the sides already, and I'm like, and then it's like, I feel, well, I've got a few other auditions I have to go to before I can come back.
Wow.
Like, this is the only day of the year that I've got for auditions, but I think I can fit it in.
I'll squeeze you in.
Yeah. And so I go to my other auditions, and I come back, and I audition for Layla, and I book the role. And so that was really exciting for me. And also, so see, being a model and oftentimes photographed, I think people would see my headshot and they want me to be like this mysterious, sexy, powerful person. I'm not.
Is that from like their initial scope, like you said, of your headshot? Yeah.
I think, yeah, like, because, and probably at the time I had more modelly photos. I didn't really understand, like, how to market myself in headshots. But the truth is, like, I want to be able to play something that's extreme emotional depth, like the psychological thriller, but also like fun, lighthearted, goofy things.
I think that's something that I see a lot. And again, my limited experience with actors just stems from the actors that I know and like. And it's very refreshing to see them break out of their norm and be that kind of, have that versatility. And, I'm kind of getting to talk to one of the actors. And I guess what I want to ask you is what kind of goes into creating that versatility? Because, you have these polar opposite roles, right? And how do you put yourself in the headspace of one and then transition to the other?
It's fantastic.
I mean, the truth is, one thing that you hear in class a lot is never judge your character, because we all have the capability of doing anything. Like, if you're playing a murderer, you can't be like, well, I would never murder. Like, you have to find that, like, what would drive me to that? Like, where's that dark spot in me? Because really, the truth is, we all have a little bit of. Watch out, Michael. I mean, not that I plan on murdering anybody, but and we all have so many different sides. Like, we all have sad, dark days, right?
Yeah,
we all have times that we're having a blast, we feel more extroverted, and we're having a lot of fun. Like, we all are versatile in the things that we feel. And so I think it's for me, and every actor is different. Like one of my closest actor friends, a lot of times I think, oh, am I not preparing enough? Because it's like all this preparation. And I just kind of want to wing it a little bit. Not just wing it, but I enjoy what comes to the less I've studied it, the more I feel like there's an organic, natural feel to it for me as an actor. And now some people, like, the more they study it, the more they feel. But see, I've done both. I don't know.
No, it's interesting because it sounds like each role requires that different approach, and just teasing that apart is something that I find really, really interesting about a lot of actors and artists. And I mean, as you kind of take the plunge into your own work, which I understand, you're the writer, the director, and the lead actress, right? How do you then, pivot and shift in that category from, instead of being cast in a work, by wearing all of those hats?
Yeah, there's definitely a little bit of an insecurity because when you've been cast for something, it almost gives you this badge of honor. Like, I know I'm good for this because I competed against 100 other people. They cast me. They want what I'm doing. When you've cast yourself, I keep having to tell myself, I need to do what I want, not what I think other people might want to see. Because I would cast the person that did what I wanted, And so there's a little bit of an insecurity in it because I haven't been cast as the role. I've cast myself. So, although this week I've started rehearsing with the other actors I cast who did not audition, and I was like, they were perfect. They're great. So I'm also going to be great.
There we go.
That serves as such an encouragement. Oh my gosh. Just two quick things real quick before we wrap it up, if you have another minute or so. Okay. Number one, your best impression of somebody. Do you have any good impressions?
Oh gosh, no.
Like Brando or anybody? Or
No, I'm not doing
De Niro.
that.
Okay. All right. The real question I wanted to get at. I just wanted I wanted to hear you laugh again. All right. So you spoke of faith. You talk about being able to, pivot, of course. You talked about hardships. You talked about uncertainty, taking all kinds of risk. What would you say to somebody that's out there that's on the precipice of like stepping out to do something? So maybe it's not filmmaking or, how would you encourage them?
Risk-taking, yeah.
I think just don't give up. And I've heard this from so many people. The people who are successful are the ones who don't give up. It's not always the one who, or just do it. It's like not always the best person that makes it. It's just the person who does it.
A lot of grit.
And
sounds like grit.
It. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and also God's timing is not always our timing. So sometimes you might be like, when we start out, I've been doing this for 6 months, God. And then I've been doing this for 4 years, God. I've been doing this for 10 years, God. Like, when is it going to be good? But you got to love the thing because you can't continue to, especially if it's an artistic thing or a business venture or whatever. Like, if you don't love it, you can't stick with it.
Yeah.
There's anything in life, there's too many hardships to stick with it if you don't love it.
Yeah, we call that, like, with our guests here, we always want to talk about the red hot why they do, what sparks them to get up and keep going. And, it's quite often we hear it's not about the money. We know people that are pursuing the medical field or whatever, but it's because there's a red hot why behind that.
Yeah.
It reminds me of a book written by Angela Duckworth called Grit.
Oh yeah, I've read that book.
My daughter talks about it all the time, but I haven't read it.
You haven't read it. You're living it. Now you got to read it.
Rafa, you got to get her on here next year.
We got it. No, but it kind of echoes what you just said, to reiterate that point, where you don't have to be the smartest. I know I'm not the smartest, but I've found that if you just stick with something, and I think you're a walking example of that, if you just stick with it and you don't give up, you don't know how long it takes. But as you continue to stick with it, I oftentimes would even say that the longer someone sticks with it, the more of a transformative experience it's going to be, not only for themselves, but for the people around them. Because once they come into fruition, they're a force to be reckoned with. And in the short time that we've spoken, I see a lot of that in you. So it really, really has been a pleasure to get you on here.
Yeah, it's been an honor to have you, Monica. Thank you so much. And we're really looking forward to hearing about your future projects. And again, just what a blessing it is for us and our family to know you and call you friend and learn from you. So thank you for coming on.
Oh, thank you guys for having me.
This is great. Ciao. Thank you for tuning into Pivot. Hope it left you inspired, motivated, and reminded that redemption is always within reach. no matter how far you've spun out when life happens.